Well, on behalf of the Center on Global Transformation's Pacific Leadership Fellow Program and the 21st Century India Center here at UC San Diego School for Global Policy and Strategy, just wanted to welcome you. My name is Achyuta Adhvaryu. I'm the director of the India Center as well as faculty here at GPS. And we're so pleased and honored to have you here as a Pacific Leadership Fellow. So, Dr. Kirit Parikh, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your career and sort of what got you to where you are now.
Well, my name is Kirit Parikh. I started out in engineering, got a PhD in engineering, and changed over to economics. And I've been a professor of economics, involved primarily in development policies and various kind of energy and agriculture and other issues and policy in the country, but mainly tried to push up human development and poverty reduction in the country. I don't know whether I should give you a long history about my career, but I can tell you that if I just concentrate on what we are talking about, low carbon strategy and inclusive growth and energy transitions, I think it all. I was a member of the Planning Commission in charge of energy. In 2005, we formulated the integrated energy policy of the country, which looked at all aspects of the energy sector and so on. Mm-hmm. And it was later on it was adopted by the government as its official integrated energy policy. One of the points that we made out there is that from a long-term perspective, India will need to rely on solar energy because it doesn't have any adequate oil and gas reserves.
Right.
And therefore, in 2009, we started a solar mission. And the solar mission's objective was to set up 20 gigawatt of solar power by the end of 2030. And we recognize that, to do this, we should give initially subsidy to people. But it was also required that subsidy should not be given in a way that people's incentive to innovate and cut down cost is cut. So what we decided was to innovate a reverse bidding. We asked people to bid for a particular site and a particular amount of solar power there, but give what price at which they will sell the electricity. And then the lowest bid was then given. The first bid came to around 1350 rupees, 13.5 rupees per kilowatt hour. Now gradually, over 5-6 years, so many private players came into the system that today the price is around $2.4 rupees per kilowatt hour. And 1 rupee today is equal to, or $1 is equal to 83 rupees in India, Indian currency. So you can see how much the price have come down and so on. Another thing that has happened is that a lot of private sector entry came into the power sector. And we have seen that really a large part, even more than 50% of the investment in the power sector now comes from private sector. So I think we have got a very liberalized private sector. And of course that required that we make certain other policy adjustments. For example, we should say that how do we determine the price? So we had to set up power exchanges where people will bid what power they want where for every 15-minute interval, and others will say what they're willing to sell at that price, and a market clearing price would be determined. So I think that way we have made a lot of progress in the power sector. Now today India's ambition is to have 500 gigawatt of non-fossil installed capacity in India by 2030.
Wow.
And that should really, that means solar and wind have grown dramatically in the country over these years. So I think that I would say would the main way in which this thing is moved in that direction.
That's amazing. So what are some of the infrastructural challenges to achieving the ambitious goals that India has in terms of building out these grids, making sure they're connected properly to the overall grid? And then, how do those interact with India's skyrocketing energy demand?
Yeah, the thing is that, a solar power plant generates electricity for only about 16-17% of the time, whereas a coal-based power plant will generate electricity, can generate up to 80% of the time. So if I want to replace 1 megawatt of solar coal-based power plant by solar plants to generate the same amount of energy, electrical energy, I need to invest in 4 times as many solar power capacity. And that means you need a lot of investment. Solar plants have a higher upfront cost, so there is hardly any running cost, whereas coal-based plants have a significant amount of running cost. So I think what has really happened here is that solar costs have dramatically come down internationally also, and so even the battery costs are coming down. But the real problem comes is since the solar is available only during the sunlight hours, and wind availability is not even known when, and it varies from month to month. And some month the wind is very high, and it can generate up to 30% plant factor. In other months, it may be only 11, 12, 13% plant factor. So I think the main problem there, infrastructural challenge is how do we balance this? Where is the balancing power so that because demand doesn't vary like that as the solar power varies. So we need to have a balancing power is a very important challenge that we face. Well, fortunately, India has had a large number of hydroelectric plants. So for the time being, for up to a certain level, we can manage this by varying the generation from hydropower. The other challenge comes is that solar and wind capacities, or where they could be set up, are in few states. And demand is, you want it all over. Right. So we had to take a number of measures to say that solar and wind are encouraged. So for example, now the transmission for renewable power is free. So there is no cost of transmission. Second thing was that we didn't have a national grid, that interconnected grid, and that has been realized about 5-7 years ago or 10 years ago, and that has really made it possible. Earlier, when at Indira Gandhi Institute long ago, we did these studies on power and integrating grids, we realized that even states within the same grid would not trade power with each other, and unless the minister clarifies, certifies that yes, you can send this power to the next state, that used not to happen. But I think that's not an important problem at the moment. Currently, I think our problem is if we expand renewables so much, how are we going to balance it? We can have we can have pumped storage, we can have battery technology store electricity, and we can have also pump storage in off-grid, off-river pump storage. These are also possibilities are there. And there's a large amount of options are available for that in the country. So I think we can develop a sector in such a way that the power is available as demanded, and yet we have a lot of renewables in the system. And mainly the private sector is playing a huge role here in this. And that liberalization has taken place in many ways. Some states have privatized the distribution companies, but very few. Most of them still control the distribution companies. And that creates a different kind of problems.
Final question for you. Many academic inquiries have looked at the idea that there are huge problems on the consumer end with paying for electricity, with leakage of corruption in the electricity grid. and unsanctioned lines, etc. How does the country kind of deal with that problem as we ramp up the supply side? How do we deal with issues on the demand side of energy?
Two issues here. One is that there was a lot of what called transmission and distribution losses, as well as theft or commercial losses, that people were not billing for all the electricity supplied, and a lot of stealth was going on in energy sector. And at one stage, this so-called combined A, T, and C losses, T and D and commercial losses together, were almost 30%. Today, they have come down to around 16-17%. But international standard, it should be less than 8%. So we have a long way to go here. Now, many states, measures can be taken, but they are not always successful. So that's one problem of electricity trade and stealing. The second problem is that what you pointed out, that if many states are giving free electricity to the poor, if that is happening, then how do you pay and collect for this? Now, the ideal solution, of course, would be to measure everyone's electricity consumption. And many states in India do not measure the energy supplied to farmers, electricity supplied to farmers. And therefore, all kinds of distortions come into the system. Now, when we had, when states say that, okay, I'll give everyone 200 or 400 kilowatt hour of power per month free to all households or at subsidized price, then obviously there is a huge stress on this. Now, the courts have ruled that if a state can give whatever subsidy it wants, but it must fully compensate the distribution companies for the subsidy they are giving. Only trouble is states don't provide that subsidy in time. And therefore, the distribution companies have to borrow money and their costs go up. But I think the solution is straightforward, in my opinion. You can meter everything, provide everyone first 100 or 200 kilowatt hour at a lower rate, and then have a higher rate for subsequently. But other solution which is being now advocated is to supply electricity by prepaid cards. So people have prepaid cards and they will get power on that basis. And you can give them prepaid card saying, okay, 100 units at 1 rupee, and the rest of it you have to provide and give at normal rate. So I think that way it can encourage people to save electricity.
That's absolutely fascinating. Well, I just want to say thank you for spending some time with us here today. Thank you for being part of the PLF program, and we wish you a very pleasant visit to San Diego.
I think we are delighted to be here, and I can tell you we've been talking to people and learning a lot here. So
that's wonderful.
Thank you for inviting us, and we are happy to have been here.
Fantastic. Thanks.